You have a heart beating in your chest. Right now it's about 70 times a minute. You don't notice it. It works quietly, steadily, without extra effort. Its mass is less than 1% of your body weight. Less than 1%. And that's enough to pump blood throughout your body, supplying oxygen to your brain, muscles, and organs. Evolution decided that 1% is sufficient. And for humans, that's indeed the case. Now take a creature that weighs less than a coin, a creature the size of your thumb. And this creature's heart makes up 2.5% of its total body mass. Not 1%, not 1.5, 2.5. In proportion to its size, this heart is 3 times larger than yours. And it doesn't beat 70 times a minute. It beats 250, at rest. When this bird is simply sitting on a branch and doing nothing, its heart produces 250 beats in 60 seconds. But that's not the limit. The Costa's hummingbird, a small species that lives in the deserts of the southwestern United States, has a resting heart rate that can reach 500 beats. And during moments of activity, it can go up to 900 beats per minute. That's 15 beats per second. While you read one word, this bird's heart manages to contract and relax 15 times. The walls of this heart are incredibly thin. This isn't a structural defect. It's an engineering solution. Thin walls allow the heart to perform ultra-fast cycles of contraction and relaxation that are impossible with thick muscle tissue. A thick heart wouldn't be able to relax at such speeds. It would get stuck in a partially contracted state and stop pumping blood. The hummingbird solved this problem millions of years before humans began designing piston engines. Next is breathing. At rest, a hummingbird takes about 250 breaths per minute. This isn't an estimate or a guess. This is a recorded figure from clinical studies published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. 250 breaths per minute. In that same time, you would take 16 to 18. Hummingbird, 250. The lungs of all birds are structured differently than those of mammals. Air flows through them in one direction, rather than back and forth like in us. This is a common feature of the class Aves, and it's inherently more efficient than our system. But hummingbirds have pushed this system to the limit. Their lungs extract such a percentage of oxygen from the air that these birds can fly at an altitude of 4,000 meters. 4,000 meters, that's the Andes. That's the height at which climbers wear oxygen masks because the oxygen in the air is half of what it is at sea level. A person at that altitude struggles to breathe, moves slowly, and thinks with difficulty. Hummingbirds fly at that height. They hover in the air, drink nectar from flowers, accelerate to full speed, and do this every day, their entire lives. Colombia is the absolute world record holder for the number of hummingbird species. 168 species live in this one country. Many of them inhabit high-altitude conditions where the air is thin, temperatures drop below freezing at night, and sometimes they have to fly hundreds of meters against the wind to reach the nearest flower. And they do it, every day. Now, metabolism. The average energy expenditure of a hummingbird in flight is about 0.7 kilocalories per hour. That seems negligible. 0.7 is less than the energy in a single grape. But context is important here. When you calculate energy expenditure per unit of body mass, the hummingbird becomes the absolute record holder among all warm-blooded animals that have ever lived on this planet. No mammal, no other bird burns energy with such intensity per gram of body weight. And here's what's truly astonishing about their metabolism. Glucose, dissolved in the blood and interstitial fluid of the hummingbird, provides energy for only a few minutes of flight. A few minutes, and the fuel tank is empty. For any other animal, that would mean collapse, a stop, a fall. But the hummingbird's body instantly, without a single pause, switches to burning glycogen and then fatty acids. This switch between fuel types happens seamlessly. There's no delay, no gap in energy supply, no stutter. One energy source runs out, another kicks in at the very same second. Engineers designing hybrid engines for cars still can't achieve such smooth transitions between electric and gasoline modes. Hummingbirds do this inside their own bodies, on the fly, without slowing down for a moment. And after all this, there's the brain. Here's where the story gets really strange. Andy Hurley from the University of Lethbridge in Canada has studied the cognitive abilities of hummingbirds for 22 years. Not 2 years, not 5, 22. A quarter of a century of his scientific career has been devoted to understanding what happens in a brain the size of a grain of rice. And here's what he discovered. The hummingbird's brain is 7,000 times smaller than the human brain. 7,000 times. It's even hard to comprehend as a proportion. That's the difference between a grain of sand and a watermelon. And this tiny brain can remember the locations of flowers, encode the geometry of the surrounding space, and track the passage of time. In one of his experiments, Hurley set up 8 feeders. 4 of them were filled every 10 minutes. The other 4 were filled every 20 minutes. The hummingbirds had to figure out which feeders were filled more frequently, remember the time of their last visit to each, and plan the optimal route to avoid wasting energy on empty flights. And they did it. They understood the system, learned the schedule, and began visiting the 10-minute feeders twice as often as the 20-minute ones. They remembered when they last visited each feeder and planned their next visit accordingly. Hurley himself admitted that to accomplish this task, he personally would need a pencil, paper, and 8 stopwatches. A scientist with a human brain that is 7,000 times larger would require external tools. The hummingbird manages without them. And this was a laboratory experiment with 8 points. In the wild, hummingbirds operate on routes that include hundreds of flowers, hundreds of nectar sources, each filling at different rates, located at varying distances, blooming at different times. And the hummingbird keeps this entire map in its head, in a brain the size of a grain of rice, weighing less than a gram. Do you know what's most paradoxical about this? We tend to think that complex behavior requires a large brain. That intelligence is primarily a matter of the volume of neural tissue. More neurons, more possibilities. The hummingbird disproves this logic every second of its existence. This organism shouldn't work. The heart is too fast. The lungs are too efficient. The metabolism is too intense. The brain is too small for the tasks it accomplishes. By all parameters, this creature is on the edge of what is physically possible for living tissue. And every morning, it wakes up and does it all over again. But everything you just heard is only the foundation, because the truly insane things begin when the hummingbird takes flight. Any bird flies by the same principle. The wing moves down, creating lift. The wing moves up, which is a recovery stroke, returning to its original position. Down means thrust. Up means pause. That's how pigeons, eagles, sparrows, and albatrosses fly. That's how all birds on the planet fly, except for one. The hummingbird's wing doesn't work like a wing. It works like a helicopter blade. It creates lift both when moving down and when moving up. 25% of the lift is generated during the recovery stroke, the motion that is useless for all other birds. The hummingbird doesn't waste a single flap. Every wing movement is productive. That's why the hummingbird can do what no other bird in the world can do. It can hover. It can hang motionless in the air like a helicopter, not moving forward, backward, or sideways. It can fly backward. It can fly upside down. No pigeon, no hawk, no albatross can do that. Only the hummingbird. In 2018, researchers from Stanford University studied how the Anna's hummingbird transitions from hovering to vertical ascent. The bird hangs in the air motionless, and in the next moment, it shoots straight up like a tiny rocket, gaining dozens of meters in just a few seconds. The Stanford team calculated the muscle power needed for such a maneuver. The result was at the very limit of what is physically possible for living muscle tissue, not close to the limit, at the very limit. The hummingbird flies at the edge of biological capability. Just a little more, and the muscles wouldn't be able to handle the strain, but they do, every time. In 2015, another study was published in the journal eLife. Scientists set up an automatic tracking system and recorded the full flight paths of 20 Anna's hummingbirds. Not short fragments, but complete routes, every turn, every acceleration, every deceleration. And when they analyzed the data, they discovered something that turned the understanding of bird flight upside down. The hummingbird's maneuverability is not determined by body size, not by wingspan, not by aerodynamic shape. It is determined by a single parameter, muscle power in a burst mode. Birds with higher peak muscle power flew faster, accelerated more sharply, and made more complex turns. Body mass played no role at all. A heavy hummingbird with strong muscles maneuvered better than a light hummingbird with weak ones. It's like if, in Formula One racing, the size of the car didn't matter, only the power of the engine. And here's another fact that sounds like fiction, but has been captured on video. Ruby-throated hummingbirds were filmed passing through a chain-link fence, a regular construction mesh with openings smaller than their wingspan. Smaller. The wings couldn't fit through the holes. Any other bird would have crashed into the fence or turned back. The hummingbirds found two solutions. The first option, they pressed their wings against their bodies and slipped through the opening ballistically, like a bullet. For a fraction of a second, they stopped flapping, compacted into a small projectile, flew through the mesh, and instantly spread their wings on the other side. The second option, they turned sideways and continued flapping their wings, but with reduced amplitude and increased frequency. They shortened their wing movement to fit through the opening and compensated for the loss of lift with faster flaps. It's like if a pilot shortened the wings of an airplane mid-flight and immediately adjusted the engines to avoid crashing. No other bird on the planet does this. No other bird is capable of such a feat. But the craziest story about hummingbird flight is a story about love. More precisely, it's about how a male proves to a female that he's worthy of being the father of her chicks. In 2009, Christopher Clark from the University of California, Berkeley, published a study on the courtship dive of the Anna's hummingbird. The male ascends to a great height. He hovers for a moment, and then he dives down straight toward the female perched on a branch. Clark measured the speed of this dive and converted it into body lengths per second, a standard unit that shows how many times the object's own body length it covers in a second. This is important because absolute speed doesn't give the full picture. A jet fighter flies faster than a hummingbird in absolute terms, but it's also thousands of times larger. So, the Anna's hummingbird, in its dive, covers about 383 body lengths per second. The peregrine falcon, the fastest bird in the world, covers about 200. A jet fighter and afterburner reaches about 150. The hummingbird in its dive is faster than a fighter jet. In relative terms, this tiny bird weighing just a few grams outpaces a machine designed by the best engineers on the planet. But speed is only half the trick. The other half is braking. At the lowest point of the dive, the hummingbird sharply pulls out of the spiral. The overload during this braking is about 9G. 9G means 9 times the force of gravity. This means that at the moment of braking, the hummingbird's body weighs 9 times more than usual. Blood rushes to the legs. The overload presses on every organ, every muscle, every vessel. For comparison, fighter pilots lose consciousness at 8G, even in special anti-G suits that compress the legs and abdomen to prevent blood from pooling away from the brain. Even after months of physical training, 8G knocks a person out. The hummingbird endures 9, without a suit, without training, several times a day, every breeding season, for its entire life. And here's where the most elegant part of this story begins. At the moment of braking, the hummingbird's tail feathers vibrate in the airflow. This vibration produces a sharp, distinct snapping sound. It's not a voice. The hummingbird doesn't shout or sing. It's a pure aerodynamic effect. Air rushes through the tail feathers at high speed, they vibrate, and the sound carries through the area. The frequency and volume of this snap directly depend on the health and strength of the male. The stronger the bird, the faster it dives, the sharper it breaks, the louder and clearer the feathers sound. The female sits on the branch and listens. She assesses the quality of the genes by the sound, not by the color of the feathers, not by the size of the body, not by the beauty of the dance, but by the aerodynamic snap produced during a 9G breaking. And it's impossible to cheat this system. It's not a peacock tail that can be fanned out wider to make an impression. It's not a song that can be learned. It's physics. Either your body can accelerate to 383 body lengths per second and break with 9G overload, or it can't. If you're weak, sick, or genetically inferior, you won't be able to produce that sound. You physically won't be able to dive fast enough and break sharply enough. The female will hear a quiet, indistinct snap and won't choose you. This is the most honest test of genetic quality that nature has ever devised. No bluffing, no pretending, just pure physics and biology. Try to wrap your head around that for a second. A bird the size of your pinky performs a maneuver that would kill a trained military pilot, and it does this for a date. It risks its life not for food, not from a predator, not for territory, but to produce the right sound for the female sitting below, evaluating the aerodynamics of its tail. When engineers design fighter jets, they set a limit for overload. There's a maximum beyond which the structure fails, and the pilot loses consciousness. All design is built around never reaching that limit. The hummingbird lives at that limit. It doesn't avoid it. It uses it as a courting tool. The breaking point of living tissue isn't a limitation for the hummingbird. It's a mating signal. That was about flight, about what the hummingbird does in the air. But this bird has a problem that's even more complicated than any maneuver. This problem is called surviving until morning. And the way the hummingbird solves this problem changes everything you thought about the boundaries between life and death. Since 1833, almost 180 years, scientists have been convinced they knew how hummingbirds drink nectar. The explanation was simple and beautiful. The hummingbird's tongue has two grooves, resembling thin tubes. When the tongue touches the nectar, the liquid rises up these grooves due to capillary action, the same physical phenomenon that allows water to climb up a narrow glass tube. There's no muscular effort, no active suction, just the physics of liquid in a thin channel. This explanation made its way into textbooks, encyclopedias, and documentaries. For 180 years, no one challenged it. In 2015, Alejandro Rico Guevara from the University of Connecticut decided to test this. He and his colleagues directed high-speed cameras at 18 species of hummingbirds from 7 different evolutionary branches and recorded every movement of the tongue in slow motion. They discovered that the textbooks were wrong. For 180 years, the textbooks had been wrong. The hummingbird's tongue doesn't work like a capillary tube. It functions like an elastic micropump. When the tongue extends from the beak, the grooves flatten, compressing into thin strips. At the moment the flattened grooves touch the nectar, they expand back into a cylindrical shape. The walls of the grooves are elastic, and their return to the original shape creates a suction force that draws the liquid in. This isn't passive capillary rise, it's an active pump built into the tongue itself. And this pump operates an order of magnitude faster than capillarity. An order of magnitude isn't a little faster or twice as fast, it's 10 times faster. The frequency of tongue movements is around 14 licks per second under normal conditions. At maximum intensity, it can reach up to 17. In 1 second, the tongue extends, touches the nectar, sucks in the liquid, retracts, and this repeats 17 times. Each movement lasts less than 60 milliseconds. After this discovery, 50 years of research on the co-evolution of hummingbirds and flowers had to be re-evaluated. For half a century, scientists built models of the interaction between the bird and the plant, based on the assumption that drinking speed was determined by capillarity. All calculations of energy efficiency, all models of optimal corolla shape, all theories about why some flowers attract hummingbirds while others do not, everything was based on a misunderstanding of the fundamental mechanism. One discovery with a slow-motion camera overturned half a century of scientific work. Now, to the main question of this section. Hummingbirds burn energy faster than any other warm-blooded creature. During the day, they manage, flying from flower to flower, drinking nectar, converting sugar into fuel, and flying again. But at night, the flowers are closed. There's nowhere to fly. There's nothing to eat. Yet their metabolism continues to burn calories. If a hummingbird slept like ordinary birds, simply closing its eyes and reducing activity, it would burn through all its fat reserves in a few hours and die of exhaustion before dawn. Every night is a potential last night for a hummingbird. And that's where torpor comes in. This isn't sleep. This isn't hibernation. It's a state in which the hummingbird's body nearly shuts down. The metabolism slows by 95%. Body temperature drops by 20 degrees or more. Heart rate decreases to a minimum. The bird is effectively balancing on a thin line between life and death, intentionally reducing all vital processes to the limit beyond which death begins, but not crossing that threshold. In 2021, Eric Eberts from the University of Toronto published a study in the journal eLife that first showed that torpor isn't just a simple switch with two positions, on and off. It's a complex strategy with rules that change depending on the season. In early and mid-summer, male hummingbirds use torpor only in emergency mode, when fat reserves drop below 5% of body mass. 5% is the red line beyond which starvation begins. Only when crossing this line does the body agree to enter torpor, because torpor itself is dangerous. Exiting it requires enormous energy expenditure. The body must warm up by 20 degrees in just a few minutes, and not every bird survives this process if it's too exhausted. But at the end of summer, before migration, everything changes. The 5% threshold disappears. Birds begin to enter torpor even with high fat levels, up to 40% of body mass. 40% isn't an emergency reserve, it's a substantial surplus. Why would a healthy, plump bird enter a state on the brink of death? To conserve energy at night and build up even more fat during the day. Torpor shifts from a survival tool to a strategy for strategic accumulation. The bird intentionally shuts down every night to gain as much weight as possible by the time of migration. A separate study from the University of New Mexico in 2025 painted an even clearer picture. Hummingbirds enter torpor when their evening fat reserve is less than 500 milligrams, half a gram. They exit torpor in the morning with a reserve of about 180 milligrams, just enough to reach the first blooming flower and start feeding. 180 milligrams is a supply for just a few minutes of active flight. If the first flower is too far away, or if it hasn't opened yet, or if another hummingbird has already drained it of nectar, the chances drop sharply. In 2023, a team from the University of Washington studied 249 hummingbirds of 29 species in Colombia. They found that torpor isn't simply on or off. Birds calibrate the depth and duration of torpor based on air temperature, their physical condition, and food availability. A colder night means deeper torpor. More reserves mean shallower torpor. Fewer flowers in the area mean longer torpor. It's a flexible tool with dozens of settings, and each bird selects its own combination of parameters every evening based on the specific day's conditions. And now, reproduction. This is where the entire system reveals its harshness. A nesting female cannot enter torpor at all. She sits on her eggs, and those eggs must remain warm. If her body temperature drops by 20 degrees, the embryos won't survive such cooling. This means that during the incubation period, the female is deprived of her main energy-saving tool. The only way a hummingbird can survive the night, torpor, is closed off to her. She has to maintain her normal body temperature all night, burning through fat reserves at a regular, unreduced rate. The result is that the female must eat even more intensely than usual. She flies out of the nest every 20 to 30 minutes for nectar, returns, sits on the eggs, warms them, and after 20 to 30 minutes, flies out again. This continues throughout the entire incubation period, every day, every bright part of the day. And every night she sits on the nest without the option of entering torpor, losing calories that she can't replace until dawn. Try to piece this entire picture together. A creature with a metabolism at the limit of biological possibilities. Every night, a controlled simulation of death to make it to morning. Every morning, a wake-up with energy reserves for just minutes. Every flight to a flower, a gamble, because fuel lasts only a short time, and an empty flower means lost calories without compensation. And through all this, the female in the breeding period voluntarily gives up her only survival tool to keep her eggs from freezing. Any engineer given such a technical assignment would say that the system is unviable. Too many critical points of failure, too narrow tolerances, too little margin for error. Yet hummingbirds live in this system for 3 to 12 years, depending on the species, and each of those days looks the same. Wake up, find nectar in just minutes, hold on until dark, and shut down again until morning. But there's one more thing you don't know about this bird. It sees a world you can't see. It perceives colors you can't even imagine. And these colors aren't just a beautiful detail. They determine whether the hummingbird will survive or not. You have 3 types of color receptors in your eyes. 3 types of cones, for red, green, and blue. Everything you see, every shade, every color of the rainbow, every sunset, and every painting in a museum. It's a combination of signals from those 3 types of cells, 3 channels, and your brain combines them to create millions of shades. It's impressive, but that's not the whole picture. You have one non-spectral color, just one, purple. It's called non-spectral because it doesn't exist in the rainbow. There's no purple in the rainbow. There's a violet part of the spectrum, but the purple you see when red and blue light mix doesn't correspond to any wavelength. It only arises in your mind when the red and blue cones fire simultaneously while the green ones remain silent. Your brain receives an impossible combination of signals and invents a color that doesn't exist in the physical world. Purple is a hallucination shared by all humans on the planet. Hummingbirds have 4 types of cones. The 4th type perceives ultraviolet, a part of the spectrum you can't see at all. And if one additional channel seems like a minor improvement, here's the mathematical implication. Birds with 4 types of cones can theoretically see 5 non-spectral colors. Not 1, like you. 5. Ultraviolet plus red, ultraviolet plus green, ultraviolet plus yellow, ultraviolet plus purple, and the regular purple that we also have. 5 colors that don't exist in the rainbow, that don't correspond to any wavelength, and exist only in the bird's mind. In 2020, a team led by Mary Caswell Stoddard from Princeton University decided to test whether hummingbirds really see these colors or if it's just a theoretical possibility. They published their research in one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The team consisted of researchers from 4 universities: Princeton, the University of British Columbia, Harvard, and the University of Maryland. For 3 consecutive summers, they conducted experiments in a high-altitude alpine meadow where broad-tailed hummingbirds live. They built special LED tubes capable of emitting those non-spectral combinations with ultraviolet light. Next to each tube was a feeder. One tube glowed with a non-spectral color and pointed to the feeder with nectar. The other glowed with a regular color and pointed to an empty feeder. If the hummingbird can distinguish these colors, it will fly to the correct tube. If it can't, it will choose randomly. Hummingbirds distinguish them with ease. They easily told ultraviolet plus green apart from pure ultraviolet and pure green. For them, these were three completely different colors, just as red, blue, and purple are three different colors for you, even though purple is a mix of the first two. But the hummingbirds went further. They even distinguished two different shades of the ultraviolet plus red combination, one slightly redder, the other slightly less so. Two shades of a non-existent color that you can't see or imagine. Ben Hogan, one of the co-authors of the study, said that trying to envision an additional dimension of color vision is both exhilarating and challenging. And he's right, you can't imagine it. It's not a matter of imagination or effort. Physically, you lack the apparatus to experience what a hummingbird feels when looking at a flower. You see a red petal with a yellow center. The hummingbird sees something for which there are no words in human languages because no human has ever seen it. Stoddard's team analyzed 3,315 samples of feathers and plants. They concluded that a significant portion of colors and plumage that seem ordinary to humans appear non-spectral to birds. We look at a flower and see yellow. The hummingbird looks at the same flower and sees ultraviolet yellow, a color that differs from yellow for it as much as red differs from blue for you. And this is where it becomes clear why this is important not just for science, but for survival. Hummingbirds can't afford to make mistakes. Every flight to a flower is an energy expenditure that needs to be replenished with nectar from that same flower. If the flower is empty, or if it's the wrong type of plant, or if it hasn't opened yet, the hummingbird has wasted calories. At a metabolism pushed to the limit, several empty flights in a row can cost a life. Color is the hummingbird's navigation system. Color tells it, there's nectar here, there's none there, this flower has already been visited by someone, this one is still full. And this system operates in 4 dimensions, not 3 like ours. Currently, there are 375 species of hummingbirds on Earth. These 375 species have co-evolved with about 7,000 species of plants. 7,000 species of flowers that have adapted their shape, color, and blooming schedule to specific species of hummingbirds. And hummingbirds have adapted their beaks, tongues, and flight paths to specific species of flowers. The most striking example is the sword-billed hummingbird. Its beak is 9 to 10 centimeters long. That's longer than the rest of the bird's body. The beak is longer than its torso. This disproportionate structure exists for one flower, the Passiflora mixta. The length of this flower's corolla almost perfectly matches the length of the sword-billed hummingbird's beak. 9 to 10 centimeters of tube, at the bottom of which lies nectar. No insect can reach the bottom. It's too deep. No other hummingbird can either. Its beak is too short. Only the sword-billed hummingbird drinks from this flower, and only this flower feeds the sword-billed hummingbird. If the population of the sword-billed hummingbird declines, the Passiflora mixta will lose its only pollinator. Insects bypass the problem of the long corolla simply. They pierce the base of the flower from the side and drink nectar through a hole. But in doing so, they don't touch the stamens and pistil, meaning they don't transfer pollen. The flower gets a hole, loses nectar, and fails to reproduce. Without the sword-billed hummingbird, this plant species is doomed. Without this plant, the sword-billed hummingbird loses its main food source. One cannot exist without the other. In the Andes, there are over 140 species of hummingbirds, many of which have such a close, unbreakable connection with specific plants. This is not just symbiosis. It's a mutual dependence that has developed over millions of years. And here's what's happening right now. The climate is changing. Temperatures are shifting. Blooming times are moving. A flower that opened in April 100,000 years ago now opens in March. Or in May, a hummingbird that flew to this flower in April for 100,000 years arrives, and the flower is gone. It has already bloomed, or it hasn't opened yet. The entire signaling system, in which color means nectar and nectar means life, is starting to fail. Stoddard's lab is already working on the next phase, mapping how the color landscape for hummingbirds is changing due to climate. If the flowers that hummingbirds' four-dimensional receptors are tuned to disappear or bloom at the wrong time, the navigation system honed over millions of years of evolution will cease to function. For a species that can't afford a single empty flight, this is a catastrophe. Some species of hummingbirds migrate distances of over 9,000 kilometers a year. When crossing the Gulf of Mexico, a bird burns about 1.5 grams of fat from its two reserves. It crosses open water without a single flower, without the chance to stop and eat, on one tank of fuel. And the distribution of wildflowers along migration routes is becoming increasingly unpredictable year after year. Plants bloom at the wrong times, in the wrong places, in the wrong quantities. Every kilometer of the route without expected flowers makes the torpor even more critical. The bird has to shut down at night to make it to the next food patch. This is what a hummingbird is when you put it all together. A heart that beats 900 times a minute, a brain the size of a grain of rice that solves problems for which a scientist needs a stopwatch, wings that work like helicopter blades, a dive faster than a fighter jet, with a force that makes military pilots lose consciousness, a micro-pump tongue that has disproven 180 years of scientific misconceptions, daily managed death to make it to morning, four-dimensional vision that shows colors that don't exist for the human eye, and a fragile connection with thousands of plant species that is starting to fray right now. This isn't a cute little bird flitting around a feeder in the backyard. This is the most complex biological machine that has ever existed, packed into a body weighing less than a coin. Every morning, it wakes up with just enough energy for a few minutes of flight and begins a race it must win every day without exception. No days off, no easy days. Either you find nectar or you don't. The most complex engineering solutions in the history of this planet were discovered by evolution long before humans invented the word engineering. The hummingbird is living proof of this, and a living reminder that if this system breaks, and it has already begun to break, there will be no one to fix it, because we can't even see the colors it navigates by.